The quiet hum of the Zirath Vengeance, a battle cruiser renowned for its size and firepower, filled the bridge as Commander Vorka stood in front of the viewports. The stars streaked past in a blur as they hurtled through deep space, heading toward their target, a colony that the Galactic Syndicate had claimed was strategically important. For the mercenaries of the Zirath Legion, this was just another job, another mission to secure a fast profit. The Syndicate had made it clear: eliminate the human special forces team stationed there. To most, it sounded simple. Humans. How difficult could they be to kill? Vorka had heard rumors about their tenacity, their ability to survive, but he dismissed them. Rumors, he thought. After all, the Zirath Legion had fought wars across the stars, defeating countless species with advanced weaponry and superior tactics. There were no soldiers like them in the galaxy. They had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most fearsome mercenaries. As the commander leaned against the edge of the command center's table, his eyes narrowed as he studied the coordinates, flashing on the display. He could feel the tension mounting in the crew, the eagerness for the fight ahead. It wasn't just about money for the Zirath Legion anymore. It was about proving that they were invincible. His second-in-command, Tark, a towering alien with skin like black stone and eyes like molten gold, glanced over at Vorka, sensing his thoughts. Tark's voice broke the silence. "The humans will be easy prey, Commander. We've faced worse. We'll crush them like we always do." Vorka nodded but said nothing. He had always been cautious about underestimating an enemy, even if the stories surrounding these humans seemed exaggerated. They were humans, weak, fragile creatures by galactic standards. Yet something gnawed at him. Perhaps it was the way the Syndicate had spoken of them, like they were a force to be reckoned with, something more than just flesh and bone. But even if the humans were skilled in combat, they had no chance against the Zirath Legion's firepower. It was impossible to fight an entire army of advanced mercenaries with nothing but a few dozen special forces soldiers. "We hit them hard. We hit them fast," Vorka finally said, breaking the silence. "Deploy the shock squads and secure the colony. Leave no room for resistance." The crew responded with swift nods, eager to begin. The Zirath Vengeance descended through the atmosphere of the colony planet, its thrusters cutting through the air like a predator swooping down on prey. As they neared the surface, Vorka gave the order to prepare for deployment. They were going in heavy, no subtlety, no games, just raw power. "We'll show them what happens when you pick the wrong fight," Tark muttered, his voice thick with confidence. The shuttle doors opened with a hiss, and the mercenaries stormed the surface. With each step, their boots left deep impressions in the soil. The humans they expected would be hiding, weak, terrified. What they didn't expect, however, was the sudden quiet that descended around them. The colony was eerily silent, not a single movement. Vorka signaled for his troops to spread out. This didn't feel right. The more they advanced, the more the air seemed to tighten, the tension growing thicker by the second. Where were the humans? Vorka's instincts, honed by years of combat, began to prick at the edges of his mind. Something wasn't adding up. The humans were supposed to be stationed here. Yet all he could sense was an unsettling stillness, the absence of movement. It wasn't until the first shot rang out, sharp, sudden, that the realization hit. They were being watched. Vorka froze as the sound of distant gunfire cracked through the silence, followed by the unmistakable hum of advanced weapons. His first thought was disbelief. This couldn't be right. But as the shots grew closer and the first of his soldiers dropped, the commander knew that his team had been outsmarted. They had underestimated the humans, but the question remained: who were these human soldiers really? As more shots echoed from the shadows, Vorka realized that he had made a grave mistake. The humans were no ordinary force. They had anticipated their every move. The battle was far from over, and the fight had only just begun. The Zerath Legion was about to learn that humans weren't to be underestimated, because the Alpha Legion had a reputation for turning the tide of war in ways that no one could predict. And the Mercenaries had just walked into their web. The Zerath Vengeance hovered just above the colony's surface, its engines thrumming with power. The Mercenaries of the Zerath Legion, each clad in reinforced armor and armed with the latest in alien weaponry, dropped onto the ground in perfect unison. With their battle scanners active and energy shields primed, they advanced toward the human base with confidence. The technology and firepower at their disposal were far beyond what most species in the galaxy could even dream of. They had no reason to doubt that this mission would be just like every other, swift, decisive, and profitable. Commander Vorka led the charge, his gaze fixed on the human settlement ahead. It was small, remote, and heavily fortified, perfect for a fight. He was certain they would make quick work of the humans. As his troops moved forward, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of irritation. The silence of the colony was unnerving, but it was nothing they couldn't handle. This was what the Zerath Legion did best. Yet, what Vorka didn't know was that the humans were watching, always watching. The Alpha Legion, as they were known, were legendary for their ability to disappear into the environment. They didn't fight like conventional soldiers. They were ghosts in the shadows, a constant thorn in the side of anyone foolish enough to underestimate them. And right now, they were letting the mercenaries advance, setting the stage for a deadly game of cat and mouse. The first sign that something was wrong came when a scout, Grux, vanished without a sound. One moment, the bulky soldier was advancing ahead, his weapon raised and scanning the area, and the next, he was gone. No shot fired, no warning, just silence. The squad leader, Tark, cursed under his breath, signaling the others to halt. Something was wrong. They fanned out, trying to get a better sense of their surroundings, but the dense forests and rocky hills offered too many places for an enemy to hide. Tark's thoughts raced. Where had Grux gone? Vorka snapped an order for his troops to spread out further, but the unease among the mercenaries was palpable. Then came another shot. This time, a clean hit. One of the scouts dropped to the ground, without so much as a cry. The shot came from somewhere high, some unseen position in the trees. The mercenaries retaliated, but when they fired at the trees, all they hit was empty space. No sign of the enemy. Vorka's pulse quickened. The humans weren't engaging directly. They were picking them off one by one. As the team advanced further, the attacks continued, quick, precise, and always from impossible angles. The Alpha Legion was everywhere, yet nowhere at the same time. Tark, shaken by the efficiency of the ambush, clutched his weapon tighter. He had been in countless battles, but this felt different. It wasn't just the fact that they were outnumbered. No, this was something more. These humans weren't just survivors. They were hunters, and they were toying with the Legion. Tark's eyes darted around, trying to locate any sign of the humans, but every time he thought he had seen something, a glint of movement, the slightest sound, it was gone before he could react. It wasn't just fear that crept into his chest. It was a growing realization that the mercenaries had underestimated their enemies in a way they never should have. Every move they made was countered before it even had a chance to succeed. His breath quickened as the tension reached a boiling point. Suddenly, Tark felt a sharp sting on his arm, and instinctively, he rolled to the ground behind a large boulder. A thin thread of blood trickled down his limb, the pain only adding to the overwhelming pressure mounting on him. He was alive, but for how long? He clenched his teeth. This wasn't supposed to happen. "Vorka!" Tark shouted, scrambling to a crouch. "They're everywhere. These humans. They're not like anything we've ever fought." Vorka, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, ordered his squad to fall back into a defensive formation. But it was too late. The mercenaries were scattered, lost in the forest, unable to locate any real targets. the battle was becoming. Less about tactics and more about survival. Commander Vorka knew they were being outplayed. The humans were far more than they had anticipated. They were a force in their own right. The mercenaries had the power, but the Alpha Legion had something else. A mastery of the battlefield that could not be matched. As the ambush continued, Vorka's mind raced. It was only the beginning, but the mercenaries were starting to realize. They were in over their heads. The human special forces were far from the easy target they had expected. And every time one of his soldiers fell, the fear spread. Something told Vorka this would not be a simple victory. Far from it. The Alpha Legion was playing a game they knew all too well, and now the Zerath Legion was caught in their trap. The Zerath Legion, once brimming with confidence, began to falter as they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were playing a game the mercenaries had never been taught. With every move the Legion made, the Alpha Legion seemed to anticipate it, turning the battlefield into a twisted dance of survival and strategy. No matter how much firepower the mercenaries unleashed, no matter how advanced their technology, the humans were always one step ahead, slipping in and out of sight like shadows. Every time the Zerath soldiers thought they had cornered a target, the humans were gone, vanishing into the environment as if they had never been there at all. It was as though the humans were waiting for them to make a mistake, and make mistakes they did. The first real sign of this uncanny skill came when Vandros, one of the Legion's best snipers, was taken out from a distance. The shot was so clean, so precise, that for a moment, even Vorka couldn't believe it. Vandros had been positioned on high ground, overlooking a wide stretch of terrain, his weapon locked onto a target. But then the shot came. Too fast, too accurate, piercing right through his head before he had even seen the shooter. There was no warning, no indication of danger. Just a sharp, final crack. For a few heartbeats, the entire squad froze. No. One spoke. It wasn't the kind of attack they were used to, one that relied on strength and overwhelming firepower. This was something else entirely. Something surgical. The humans weren't just soldiers, they were predators. In response, Vorka's frustration boiled over. He slammed his fist onto his command pad, furious. This couldn't be happening. He quickly re-established control, ordering his team to escalate the attack. "Bring out the heavy weapons," he snapped. "We'll flush them out, make them fight, us face to face." But even as he spoke the words, Vorka knew there was something deeply wrong. The humans weren't engaging in conventional warfare. They were dancing around them, toying with them like playthings in a twisted game. As the mercenaries deployed their most powerful weapons, the strange happenings began to multiply. Explosions rocked the terrain, clouds of smoke and dust choking the air, but no human soldiers emerged. Instead, the mercenaries found themselves caught in a constant barrage of guerrilla tactics. The humans didn't wait for their targets to come to them. They lured the Legion into ambushes, picking off their soldiers with unnerving accuracy, then vanishing before they could return fire. Each time a mercenary tried to retaliate, the enemy had already moved, leaving no trace of their presence. It became clear to the Legion that they were not dealing with ordinary soldiers. These humans were masters of unpredictability. With each passing moment, the uncertainty grew. Commander Vorka, his mind racing, began to wonder how much he really understood about their opponents. The humans weren't just skilled. They were fearless, willing to fight without the rules of engagement that governed every other soldier the Legion had ever faced. And that was exactly what terrified Vorka. The humans' experience wasn't about overwhelming numbers or advanced technology. It was about surviving in ways that defied logic, ways that threw the Zerath Legion's carefully crafted strategies into chaos. The Alpha Legion's tactics weren't designed to win battles by force. They were designed to break their enemies, mentally and emotionally, by making them doubt themselves. One by one, the mercenaries began to lose their confidence. They had been trained for a straightforward fight, one that was clear and decisive. But the humans, they fought with something else, an edge of madness that was impossible to predict. Tark, who had been Vorka's most trusted lieutenant, now seemed on the verge of cracking. "We're being hunted," he muttered, his voice low with fear. "I've never felt anything like this. It's like they know everything we're going to do before we do it." Vorka shot him a sharp look, but he couldn't deny the truth in Tark's words. Each attack from the humans felt like a well-calculated strike, and it was driving them to the edge of panic. The heavy firepower was supposed to give them an advantage, but it had only drawn the mercenaries into deeper danger. They were surrounded, on all sides, unable to locate their enemies, and their weapons were no longer as effective as they had hoped. The humans were adapting, shifting with the flow of battle, and always staying just out of reach. The Zirath Legion, known for their ruthless efficiency and overwhelming might, now found themselves questioning whether they could win. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their very sanity. With every minute that passed, the mercenaries began to doubt their victory. The humans had taken control of the battlefield without ever needing to face them directly, and the more the Legion fought, the more they realized just how out of their depth they were. Vorka knew it was only a matter of time before the Alpha Legion turned the tide entirely. The tension on the battlefield was palpable, and the once confident Zirath Legion was beginning to crack under the pressure. Their latest assault on the human position had failed, just as the others had before. The air was thick with frustration, and the soldiers could feel the weight of their failures pressing down on them. The humans had outwitted them again, leaving their mercenary forces scattered and demoralized. Commander Vorka, his face set in grim determination, paced back and forth, trying to maintain a semblance of control. He was a leader, a seasoned veteran who had led his legion to countless victories. But this was different. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were destroying the very essence of what made the Zirath Legion feared. One by one, his soldiers were beginning to crack. The usual bravado that ran through the ranks of the mercenaries had begun to dissipate, replaced by an unfamiliar feeling that no one in the Legion had ever experienced: fear. It wasn't the kind of fear that came from being outnumbered or from facing overwhelming odds. No, this was something deeper, more insidious. It was the kind of fear that gnawed at the soul, making every movement feel like a step closer to death. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of an enemy who knew how to break a person before even drawing their weapons. And it was spreading. Soldiers whispered among themselves, casting doubtful glances at the commander. Maybe this contract isn't worth it. Maybe we're outmatched. The whispers were low at first, but soon they were becoming impossible to ignore. The Zirath Legion, known for their unshakable confidence, was now plagued by uncertainty. Some soldiers were even suggesting that they withdraw from the fight entirely. It wasn't like them to retreat, but the human tactics were wearing them down. They were being hunted, not in the physical sense, but in a way that was far worse, as if the humans could see right through them. The turning point came when the Alpha Legion decided to make their presence known in a way the mercenaries hadn't anticipated. A single soldier from the Zirath Legion was captured during a failed ambush. At first, the mercenaries didn't think much of it. After all, the Alpha Legion couldn't possibly capture one of their own. They were outnumbered, and the mercenaries were too powerful, too skilled. But when the captured soldier was brought before the humans, something strange began to unfold. The humans didn't interrogate him with traditional methods. They didn't use brute force or threats. Instead, they employed something far more effective: psychological manipulation. They understood the soldier's mind, his thoughts, his fears. The human captors didn't need to break his body, they broke his spirit. They planted seeds of doubt, whispering ideas that slowly chipped away at his confidence. They knew exactly what to say, how to press the right buttons, until the soldier, once full of bravado, began to unravel. What was supposed to be a simple interrogation turned into a psychological warfare of the highest order. The soldier, shaking with fear, confessed things he had never admitted to himself. He spoke of the dread he felt every time the humans vanished into the shadows. He spoke of the overwhelming feeling that no matter what they did, no matter how many weapons they brought to bear, the humans were always one step ahead. He was scared, he admitted. He hadn't realized it at first, but now it was clear to him. He was terrified. The humans had done something to him that no enemy ever had. They had made him doubt his own strength. The Alpha Legion didn't need to kill him or extract information from him in the traditional sense. By planting that seed of fear, they had already won. And as the captured soldiers' words echoed through the minds of the other mercenaries, the whispers of doubt grew louder. It wasn't just that they were being outsmarted, it was that they were being broken. One by one, the stories spread through the ranks. Soldiers spoke of the fear that seemed to follow them, how every move they made felt like it was being anticipated by the humans. The idea that their enemies knew them so well, even before they made a move, gnawed at the mercenaries' sense of security. Vorka could feel it. The fear had already begun to spread to his own men. It wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a reality. The Alpha Legion wasn't just fighting to win. They were breaking the mercenaries mentally, forcing them to question everything they knew about war, about strategy, and about themselves. The Zirath Legion had thought they were invincible, but now they had begun to realize that the real enemy wasn't just the humans themselves. It was the fear they had implanted within them. Fear that was spreading like a virus, tearing away at the foundation of their once impenetrable will. And the battle was far from over. Amid the growing sense of dread and uncertainty that had taken hold of the Zirath Legion, a fleeting moment of respite provided a chilling revelation. It came not in the form of another ambush or surprise attack, but as a story, a tale of human resilience so powerful that it seemed almost impossible. As the mercenaries huddled in their makeshift encampment, nursing their wounds and regrouping for another assault, Commander Vorka found himself staring at the flickering display of an old data feed. The human resistance had begun to speak of it more openly, the stories they had once dismissed as mere myth, now flooding back to the forefront of their minds. What was once an anecdote, a boast from an old veteran, was now becoming the truth. The truth about humanity's ability to endure and overcome, no matter the odds. Through a series of fragmented records, a new image of the humans began to form. A species that had never known defeat, not because they were stronger or better equipped, but because they were relentless. It was said that humanity's first encounter with the Zorath, an alien species far superior in technology and sheer power, was supposed to be a slaughter. The Zorath had arrived in force, with weapons so advanced that no species, human or otherwise, had the means to fight back. Their ships were invulnerable, their weapons devastating. The humans, however, weren't willing to simply give in. What they lacked in resources, they made up for in ingenuity. A human squad, outnumbered and outgunned, had been sent on a seemingly impossible mission to sabotage a Zorath fleet that was poised to conquer the human colonies. The mercenaries listened intently as the tale unfolded, with no chance of winning. In a head-to-head fight, the humans turned to their wits. They infiltrated the Zorath fleet, not with brute force, but with subtlety and deception. By exploiting the Zorath's own overconfidence, they planted false signals that led the enemy into an ambush of their own making. They used their knowledge of the enemy's culture, their technology, and their psychology to create an illusion of weakness, all the while preparing the perfect trap. What followed was a series of unpredictable moves that left the Zorath fleet scrambling to adapt. The human squad wasn't just fighting a superior force, they were dismantling it from within, using nothing but cunning, nerve, and a profound understanding of their enemies. The story seemed too wild to be true, a piece of legend so exaggerated that even Vorka's hardened mind could scarcely believe it. But as he continued to watch the fragments, a new realization set in. The stories of humanity's resilience weren't mere boasts. They were backed by cold, hard reality. Time and time again, humans had faced forces that should have destroyed them, and yet they always found a way to survive. They adapted, they improvised, and when all seemed lost, they found a way to turn the tide in their favor. The Zorath fleet was crippled by that small squad, forcing the alien empire to retreat. A victory that seemed impossible had been won, not through overwhelming force, but through the sheer willpower and determination of a few humans who refused to give in. These humans, Vorka realized, were not like any enemy he had ever encountered. They didn't play by the same rules. And their resilience was something that went far beyond just physical endurance. They were survivors, through and through. The HFY stories, once dismissed as the exaggerated tales of those who had lived through the battles, now carried a deeper, more terrifying meaning. The Alpha Legion, those elusive warriors who had been toying with the Zerath Legion, were not simply soldiers. They were the descendants of that same unyielding spirit. The same adaptability, the same drive to survive, was embedded in their DNA. And now, as Vorka's mind shifted to the present, he couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that filled his chest. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting for something deeper. They were fighting to survive. And the Zerath Legion was learning, perhaps too late, that the human spirit was a force unlike any they had ever encountered. As the mercenaries sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the stories of human victories, once considered folklore, now resonated deeply with every member of the Legion. The power of humanity's unrelenting resilience was no longer a myth. It was a reality that they were facing head-on. The battle had shifted, and the mercenaries were beginning to understand that the humans were not the underdogs they had believed them to be. They were, in fact, the ones in control. And the Zerath Legion was beginning to fear what that might mean for them. The Zerath Legion, once a force that struck fear into the hearts of all they encountered, was now on the verge of collapse. The pressure of their failure weighed heavily on every soldier, and the time had come for an emergency council. Commander Vorka, a leader who had seen countless battles and whose name was known across the galaxy for his tactical brilliance, now stood at the edge of desperation. His mind raced as he considered their situation. He had led his legion to victory against alien species of all kinds, but nothing prepared him for this. The humans they faced were not like any of their previous enemies. They were not just soldiers. They were something more. The humans' ability to endure, adapt, and fight back with such unyielding resolve was something the Zerath Legion had never encountered. It was a force of nature, one that was as relentless as it was unpredictable. Each encounter with the Alpha Legion had only deepened the mercenaries' growing sense of unease. They were always outwitted, outmaneuvered, and outlasted. No matter how much firepower or advanced technology they brought to bear, it wasn't enough. The humans adapted too quickly, striking where they were least expected, and vanishing before retaliation was possible. It felt like the Legion was being hunted, not just by warriors, but by an intelligence that could see through every move they made. The council was tense, the air thick with frustration and fear. For the first time, the mercenaries began to openly question their mission. Some of the more seasoned soldiers, those who had fought in wars across the galaxy, spoke up. "Perhaps it's time we pull out," suggested one soldier, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "We're being slaughtered. What's the point of this contract anymore?" The words hung in the air, a dagger of doubt cutting through the already fragile morale of the group. But Vorka, too proud to admit failure, dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. "No," he growled, his voice tight with restraint. "We will not retreat. We've been through worse. These humans are nothing but a nuisance. We'll find a way to crush them." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. He had to admit it to himself. The humans weren't like anything he had encountered before. He had been so certain of their victory when they were first hired. They were the Zirath Legion, the most feared mercenaries in the galaxy. But now, every plan they devised seemed to fail. Every assault ended in disaster. Vorka could no longer ignore the truth that was staring him in the face. The humans were not just soldiers, they were survivors. And they had a resilience that seemed to defy everything the Zirath Legion knew about warfare. It was then that something shifted in Vorka. For the first time, in front of his entire team, he spoke of the fear that had been growing in his own chest. "I've never faced an enemy like this," he admitted, his voice low but steady. "We've underestimated them, all of us. We believed that their technology was inferior, that their tactics were primitive. But we were wrong. These humans, they adapt faster than we do. They've turned this into something we're not prepared for. No matter what we throw at them, they find a way to survive." The room fell silent, the weight of Vorka's words sinking in. It was the first time any of them had heard their commander speak of fear. And yet, the other mercenaries, those who had fought beside him for years, could not deny the truth in his voice. They were being defeated, not by strength, but by the humans' will to endure. Some of the mercenaries, already shaken by their experiences, began to voice what had been on everyone's mind. "Maybe it's time we pull back," one said quietly. "We're losing too many men. This isn't worth it anymore." "What happens if we don't pull back?" another soldier murmured. "We'll be wiped out to the last man. That's what happens." The murmurs of doubt spread like wildfire, each soldier passing the fear to the next. The once mighty Zirath Legion, so sure of their superiority, was now splintering under the weight of their failures. The humans had done what no one else had ever been able to do. They had made the most ruthless mercenaries in the galaxy doubt their own abilities. Vorka's mind raced as he tried to regain control of the situation. He had always prided himself on his leadership, but now he felt as though the ground was slipping from beneath him. The fear in his troops was palpable, and with it came the realization that they were not just fighting for a paycheck, they were fighting for their lives. The Alpha Legion, for all their unpredictability, were not just another enemy. They were something much worse. They were the embodiment of human resilience, and it was that resilience that had turned the tide of battle. The humans didn't need to be stronger. They didn't need to be more advanced. All they needed was their unyielding will to survive. And in the face of that, even the mighty Zirath Legion was beginning to crack. The decision loomed. The mercenaries were no longer certain of victory. They were no longer certain of anything. The question now was whether they would continue to fight, or if the fear that had spread through their ranks would be enough to drive them to flee from the battle they had once thought they could never lose. The time had come for the Zirath Legion to make an impossible decision. The once proud mercenaries, feared across the galaxy for their strength and ruthlessness, now found themselves standing at the brink of destruction. After weeks of relentless fighting, ambushes, and close calls, the outcome was clear. The Alpha Legion, the humans they had been hired to eliminate, were not just winning. They were dismantling everything the Zirath Legion had ever known about warfare. The humans had done something that seemed impossible, something that no other species had managed to do before. They had found a way to survive. And that, more than anything, was what terrified the mercenaries. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting for survival, and that was something the Zirath Legion could not match. It wasn't just their technology or their tactics that had proven effective. It was their unshakable will to endure, to adapt, and to turn every disadvantage into an opportunity. The Zirath Legion had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. The pressure was unbearable. Commander Vorka paced in his command center, his mind swirling with thoughts of retreat. He had never considered such a thing before. The Legion had faced overwhelming odds many times, but this was different. The humans weren't just another enemy to be crushed. They were something else entirely. Something he couldn't bring himself to defeat. The loss of so many soldiers weighed heavily on him. They had lost more than just men. They had lost their confidence, their pride, and their sense of invincibility. Vorka knew what had to be done, though admitting it felt like an unbearable blow to his pride. The mission was a failure. There would be no victory here, no glorious battle to be won. He couldn't send his men to their deaths. Not like this. He took a deep breath and initiated a direct communication with the Galactic Syndicate. His voice was steady, but the weight of his words felt like a heavy burden. "This mission is over," Vorka said plainly. "We cannot continue. The humans, they're unlike any adversary we've faced. We've underestimated them, and we've lost. Too many. The cost of victory is too great." There was a long silence on the other end of the communication, followed by a furious response from the Syndicate. "You can't be serious, Vorka. This contract is worth millions. You will finish this job, or you'll be paying the price." The voice was sharp, demanding. "The job is too expensive even for you," Vorka replied calmly. "The Legion is finished here. We're pulling out." The words hit like a hammer. For the first time in his career, Vorka refused to carry out an order. He had seen battles lost, but this was the first time he had ever backed down from a fight. The Syndicate, now enraged, tried to force a resolution, demanding that the Legion press forward no matter the cost. But Vorka, his mind clear and unwavering, refused to yield. "There's nothing left to gain. The humans are not just fighting us. They're teaching us something we never anticipated. We're done." The communication ended abruptly, and Vorka stood in silence, feeling the weight of his decision settle in. He turned to his team, all of them silent and tense, waiting for his command. "We're leaving," he said quietly. "Prepare the ships. We're pulling out." It was an odd feeling for the soldiers, many of whom had spent their entire lives fighting wars they had always believed they could win. But now, as the final decision was made, they knew it was time to retreat. The Alpha Legion, ever watchful, had been observing the entire time. The humans didn't need to do anything more than stay hidden in the shadows. They didn't need to chase the mercenaries away. They knew that the Zerath Legion would leave on their own. And so, as the mercenaries boarded their ships and began their retreat, the Alpha Legion remained silent, ever vigilant. There were no cheers, no grand victories, just an unspoken acknowledgement that the battle had been won. The stories would spread across the galaxy like wildfire, tales of how the Alpha Legion had caused even the most feared mercenaries to retreat. No longer were the humans just another species to be conquered. Their reputation grew, and with it, the legends of their unbreakable will. The Zerath Legion, once the most formidable force in the galaxy, now knew the truth. It was humanity's relentless spirit that had defeated them, and the galaxy would soon learn that there was no force more terrifying than the will to survive.